Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And as always, I have a fantastic and fascinating guest with me today. His name is James Walt, and he is a life transition coach who works with people aged 30 years and over who feel disconnected and disjointed from who they truly want to be. He also has worked as a specialist registered nurse in the UK for over 20 years before moving to the United States in January of 2020. And his timing is impeccable. He's kind of squeezed in right at the very last minute. He became a certified life and health coach, started his own coaching company where he inspires people to stop simply surviving life, but to start living it to their full potential. James, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
It's an honor to have you on our show, and it's an honor to have you here in the United States. So just tell us your story about how you transitioned yourself from being a registered nurse in a highly specialized area of medicine, several different areas, to then coming over to the United States and becoming a life coach.
Yeah, that's a huge transition.
Yes,
But
yes, indeed.
It was an honor and a privilege to be given the opportunity to actually have a big career break, to move to a new country, start a new adventure, and find my way post nursing. And then the wonderful thing was what I realized was that I didn't have to see myself as post nursing because the transition from life coach, health coach was just a continuation of the many years of investment in healthcare with people. Yeah, it all started in 2018 when I was diagnosed with pneumonia and I was admitted into ICU by colleagues, which was quite interesting to be on the other side when I became the patient. And it took about a week for them to realize what was going on. And I was then formally diagnosed with sarcoidosis, which is an inflammatory autoimmune disease in my heart. And that was causing the pneumonia. And then a few days after that, I was then also diagnosed with it in my lungs. And so that process of learning who I was, not as the nurse, not as the mentor, not as the teacher, not as the coach, but as the patient, and being on the other side and experiencing and seeing it. And one of the ways that I learned how to cope with that was I had medical students and medical nurses come up to me and ask me, so how did that feel? Or when we did this to you, what was going through your mind? Or what was your body's reaction? And that question for me was so integral to the transition or the challenges that I went through for the months after that. What was my body doing when I was experiencing something, or when there was a medical procedure, or I started taking medication? And that's when I realized, after a couple of decades of working in healthcare, I was never connected to my mind, my heart, and my gut. I just worked to provide the best care possible. And I had wonderful experience and such a privilege to have worked with so many families, so many patients and colleagues, but to then realize that I wasn't connected to me.
Sometimes as a healthcare provider, as a health professional, you kind of have to do that to be able to function at the level that you have to function, especially in such a highly specialized area. I am a former respiratory therapist, so I worked in all the intensive care, emergency room, and all that for 17 years before I went back to school and got my master's degree in physical therapy. And I mean, it was a very rewarding career, but it were some of the most intense moments that I never wanted to experience, with patients. And then like you, there were times that I was on the other end where I was the patient receiving care, and I really did not like that. But it's almost a feeling, it's almost surreal.
Yes, very appropriate word. Completely surreal. And to suddenly face your own mortality, to suddenly face your own physical deterioration. You know, I couldn't just keep on going the way I was going. And I had to sit down, and it was my body's way of really saying to me, it's time to take time out, sit down, hear me, listen to me, and think about what's next. And yeah, very privileged and excited to then be given the opportunity to move to America, which was halfway through my time out, as I call it.
Time out.
And once I got here, the world went into a massive transition, COVID.
Yeah.
And it was a huge lockdown. And as I went through that, I joined many support groups. I wasn't allowed to work as a nurse because of my illness. I was you know, I had to, what did they call it? Yeah, be in lockdown.
Were you considered high risk because of the sarcoidosis? Okay.
Yes, I was considered as high risk. So therefore I wasn't allowed to work in hospitals. I was, you know, and I had to isolate at home completely. And so I joined online support groups. You were going to ask me something.
Yeah. So, okay, because I'm imagining this. Were you by yourself? Or were you...
No, so I was luckily with my partner, so I wasn't alone.
Oh, good.
So there was the two of us.
Okay. I can breathe now. I can relax, because I'm
yes.
envisioning you, you know, with this diagnosis in a new country, don't know anybody and can't meet anybody, and being all by yourself. So, okay, I feel better now. I can calm down.
Yeah.
Continue.
I was luckily I was not alone completely. Okay. Yes. And then, but yeah, I then discovered the whole, like everybody else, online friendships, online support. And so I joined a few sarcoidosis support groups. And as I was helping people, or they were helping me, some of them asked me, oh, you know, are you a coach? Do you have a program? I'd love to join your program. And that's when I realized, okay, maybe that's the direction I want to go in next. Continue helping people, but helping people from a different point of view, where I bring not just physical healthcare, but I also bring mental healthcare, emotional healthcare. And connecting them all together as one.
You could never really stop being a nurse, because, I mean, that's part of who you are. And you've had those 20 years of experience as a healthcare professional. So you can't just really walk away. I mean, you can, but still all of those experiences, all of that education and expertise that comes with working in a career like that for an extended period of time is still always with you and part of who you are, and something that you can transition, if I'll use one of your words, into the next chapter of life and health coaching. So it's beautiful.
Exactly.
It's great.
And that was, for me, that was beautiful to realize that the 20 odd years that I've worked in healthcare is not lost. Just because I now have a diagnosis of an illness that I'm not necessarily able to work in hospitals anymore, or at this high speed, or the adrenaline that I used to be able to work. You know, I can still use all of that. It's still part of me, as you said. And so for me, that was literally just stepping out of my comfort zone, the world that I knew, that I was comfortable in, that was lovely, and feel everything, see everything, hear everything, not just here, but in my heart and in my gut, and bringing them all together so that I could see my way in how people can teach me, how people can learn from me, and how I can support people better.
What a beautiful opportunity. But I have to ask you, was it overwhelming?
So overwhelming. Stepping out of your comfort zone is always overwhelming, depending on what challenge you're going through, depending on what transition you are in. And for me, that was stepping out, and then you step into that fear factor of, oh my word. And the part of your brain that is, that supports your belief system, that helps you take every step through every day and helps you make decisions, that part of your brain goes into a fear, becomes scared, because it's not part of your normal day-to-day routine or your habits, or outside your belief system. And so then it forces you to step back into your comfort zone. But then there's no growth, there's no learning. So you lean into the fear, you step through it, and you feel it. Grit your teeth and hold on. And that's when the learning happened. And for me, one of the beautiful ways that really supported and helped me get through that fear factor into the learning was to certify as a health and life coach. And that was a good 2 years of isolation and lockdown and COVID, but learning and learning. And I made some beautiful friendships and met some amazing people. My world in America is so huge now. And most of it's online, which is incredible. And so it feels really close by. Like speaking to you today, it doesn't feel foreign. It doesn't feel far away, which is wonderful, even though we're not in the same state. But so yeah, that was my way of getting through that transition. And then I got to the growth part of that transition and realized that I didn't want this transition to finish. I was enjoying it. I was really getting into it and feeling it. And yeah, I realized that what I wanted to do was actually help people see that their life challenges are transitions. Some of them are big, some of them are small. And if you really feel into them and learn what they want to teach you, it's incredible. And you just, you learn so much about yourself. You get all that creativity, you get all that power, and you walk and you just shine as a new human.
It's almost like it's exponential growth.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the fear factor though, because of course, you know, fear is good and bad, because fear keeps us safe, but yet fear can really hold us back. If, for example, when we are trying something that is out of our comfort zone, even if it's something rather small, or it can be something huge, whatever it is, there is that little voice in the back of our head going, not so fast now, you know, this is new, this is scary, you might fall on your face. There's so many things could possibly happen. So how did you handle the fear, and how do you work with your clients and help them work through the fear to be able to walk through it and then get to the other side, which has so many golden opportunities to learn and grow?
Yeah. And thank you for that question. I love that question. It's a great one, because it's so fundamental to what I do, not just for myself, but for my clients. And it's helping them, working with them the same way I worked with myself, to get to the point where I was able to differentiate between fear and doubt. And so I call my doubts, I call my friend doubt. So my friend doubt and I got to a point where we were able to sit down and have conversations and say, okay, is this doubt making me take a step back, observe, listen, learn, and then make an educated decision? Is this the right thing to do? Or is this just fear wanting me to step back into my calm, comfy, you know, duvet life of not doing anything, no growth, just staying stagnant? Let the world hit you with whatever it wants, without you ever getting to a point where you go, I can see that baseball coming, I'm going to catch it. I don't have to be hit by it anymore. And so that's a big part of what I do with clients, because that was a big part of me. I had to learn that doubt wasn't something to avoid. Doubt wasn't something to run away from or even overcome. Doubt was that tap on your shoulder going, hey friend, let's sit, let's talk about this for a minute. And then so helping the client differentiate between fear and doubt, and then to move forward.
Well, I love the way you say that, the friendship and the relationship between fear and doubt. Now, when you talk about doubt, was it just generalized doubt, or was it self-doubt? Like, I can't, you know, could I really be a coach? Could I possibly do this? You know, which is really interesting when you think about it, because after 20 years in the medical profession, in intensive care, and all of those specialized units that you were working in, you would think that doubt would not come into play, but yet it does.
Yes. Fantastic principle to get your head around. Because there is no space for doubt in an ICU.
No,
absolutely not. There's a human life hanging in the balance. And the same with coaching. You know, you're holding someone's emotions. There can't be a space for doubt. But as you said, it's self-doubt. And is that self-doubt coming from a place of no knowledge?
Mhm.
Is that self-doubt coming from a place of you haven't learned this skill? And then it's about stepping back and go, okay, this is the moment where I need to learn. I actually have to sit down and read something. I have to get a life coach to teach me.
Mm-hmm.
I have to, it's the same when you learn a new skill, like becoming a ninja like yourself, or going to the gym and training to become a health coach. You have to learn those new skills, and so you can step beyond the self-doubt. So there's the fear, there's the self-doubt, and then there's the friend doubt. And we can only really do that when we've learned to be quiet, learn to hear, learn to listen, and stepping out of that zone of we must achieve, you must get ahead, you must be the best, or the other side of it, you are the worst, you can do nothing. I'm just going to sit here and be nothing. Once you step out of that cycle, which either of your belief systems could have put you in that, so I help my clients to step out of whatever belief system they're in, and help them to be quiet and calm, and then differentiate between if it's self-doubt, can I fix that by learning, reading, teaching, or is that just a belief system that's holding me back, or a warning?
I want to go back to, when you're talking about how, more skills that you gain as you are stepping out of your comfort zone and learning new things. And do you feel like, okay, once you do that and you learn more skills, then it's easier the next time to get out of your comfort zone and learn another new skill? So it's almost like that path is already, the path is already mowed.
Yes.
And then it's easier to go through it again and to actually grow even more. So there's absolutely no limit to what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you've stepped out of that incredible life cycle belief system that's holding you back, and you take that first step, change that, the next step is easier. Life, of course, does like to challenge us from time to time. So some of the steps might take you back to where you were the first time, trigger things from when you were a child or a young person. But because you've done that first step, you've changed the cycle. You have the skills, the knowledge, and the courage to take the next one. And then you're not alone anymore, because you've got knowledge, you've got skills, and you've done it, been there, got the t-shirt. You can do this.
The t-shirt. I love that. Okay. So, and then you were talking about that space of quiet and calm, because of course you're going out of the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic state where everything, all the body functions are in homeostasis. You need to be where you are, and your brain, your mind, and everything is calm and still and quiet and can take in a lot more. How do you help your clients get to that place? Because I'm somebody, and I come from a tribe that's pretty high wired or hard. Yeah. And we're just like, pretty, we're very excitable. And so it's kind of a challenge to get us into that calm and quiet space.
Yeah. The what worked for me was to learn to breathe. I just had to breathe. And that was where I started. And that's where I start with most of my clients. When you, and from a anatomy and physiology point of view, physiological nurse here, to have brought that to brain, emotion, heart, gut breathing, to then realize, actually, this is what happens when you breathe properly. You have vasodilation, you have oxygen, you have carbon dioxide going in. You suddenly, your heart rate slows down. You go into this space of, I can think clearly because I'm breathing. So yeah, sometimes it takes a few sessions with my clients to actually get them to a point where they go, okay, James, I'm breathing. And that's when you can hear. So many times when I had to give bad news to families or to patients, you could see it, you could literally see them go deaf because you've got that massive adrenaline release. And when that happens, you have vasoconstriction. So the veins in your ears literally become very, very tight. And that's just the body's reaction. You know, we talked about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic modes that our bodies go into. And that's a lot of times that happens when patients look at a nurse and go, what did the doctor just say?
Yeah.
It's because they physically have gone deaf. And for me to be able to get my clients to that point was like, you are in, you know, this belief system and we need to change this and we need to do that. They go deaf. So it's about breathing, relaxing, and getting the oxygen to where it needs to be. May it be here, or here, you know, brain, heart, or gut, so that they can digest literally what we're saying to each other.
Well, as a former respiratory therapist, I love that, but I do have my own stories of not being able to breathe, which I think is really funny because I'm a respiratory therapist that couldn't breathe. But the way that you look at breathing and the breath with, you know, my experience, professional experience, you know, the situations I was in, you know, running the ventilators and, you know, giving the breathing treatments and the breathing exercises. So really working on the mechanics of breathing. And of course, the physiology of the gas exchange and all that type of thing. But it wasn't until I was going through a really rough patch that I discovered breathing. And it was just like, oh my goodness, this whole new world opened up, which was so ridiculous because after all of those years, you know, it's like I finally discovered the true value of breathing. And I have a lot of clients, or not clients, but guests on my show who talk about meditation. And to me, just like 2 or 3 really good breaths brings me into a state where I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so amazing. I helped a director of a company a few months ago. He was diagnosed with dyslexia at an older age, and which threw him completely. Getting him to understand that that's just a new transition. It's all good. You can still run your company. You've run your company till now with it. You know, I had to teach him how to stop that shallow. He was literally just doing the short, shallow breaths and not getting the oxygen, obviously, but also that gave his body this fight and flight, and he was continuously living in that. So we got to a point where it was a big breath in and hold. And in that silence, when you hold the breath, make a decision about stop, hear, listen, breathe out. And it changed his life.
Isn't that
before
amazing?
we even got to the dyslexic stuff.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that, well, it probably didn't matter at that point once he learned how to breathe. And the other thing I do want to mention when you were talking about those shallow breaths, and, you know, so it was just always, you know, never really got the oxygenation. It's also the increased work of breathing when you're breathing like that. So you're expanding even more energy trying to do those rapid, shallow breaths that you're putting yourself even into a state of hypoxia or hypoxemia, you know, low oxygen, elevated carbon dioxide in your blood. So it's amazing. And it's also interesting. I always encourage people to try this little exploration, self-exploration of how many times they catch themselves holding their breath during the day.
Isn't it incredible how many people suddenly become aware, well, actually, I haven't breathed.
Yes.
Take a breath.
Yeah.
Think consciously about your breathing.
Yeah.
I was taught this breathing technique recently about visualizing. The way I visualized it was a hula hoop. but it's a circle. So you're breathing in at the top and then breathing out at the back, and seeing this cycle, this closed circle through your body, and releasing tension. But just, and somebody, one of the male people, sorry, let me rephrase that. One of my male clients looked at me and said, "That's too much. That's too fluffy for me. I can't cope with that." And I just said to him, just visualize a hula hoop and you're breathing around it. Don't think about it. And he looked at me and he did that in a stressful situation. And he went, "It was ridiculous, but I saw the hula hoop and I just breathed through it." But what actually then happened was I suddenly got able to start thinking clearly about what I was meant to do. "Can you please explain to me why that happened?" I said, "Because you stopped thinking about what was stressing you, and you allowed yourself oxygen, but you also allowed yourself to have distance from what was the problem. You looked at it and you went, what am I doing about this? Where is this taking me? How is this going to improve my life? How is this going to help the person I'm speaking to?" And it immediately took him out of the situation, took him out of the emotion. And he got oxygen, of course, which also helped.
Yeah, I was going to say oxygen to the brain really helps. But
it's about triggering those creative moments. So instead of being emotive about it and think, why, you kind of then just step back and think to yourself, I have to be creative about this, and ask open-ended questions. What, when, where, how?
I love the fact that you brought up the emotional aspect of it, although I really don't. I like to pretend that I have no emotions. I have no feelings. But, I just keep them to myself. But that emotional aspect, and it just triggered, a memory, something learning, in my martial arts. The one time my sensei said to me, he pulled me aside and he said, "Do not get emotional." And he said, "Do not react, with anger, he says, "Keep the emotions out of it. And then you just, respond." He says, "If you're emotional, you're going to lose every single battle that, you're faced with." And it doesn't just mean on the dojo floor, or with an opponent, but he's right. It's like when you start getting emotional, you can't think straight, and you actually end up defeating yourself.
Yeah. A lot of what happens. So I personally, just firstly, I believe emotions are incredibly important. And we shouldn't bottle them up, but there is a time and a place. And moments when we are in a stressful situation and all these feelings come up, all these emotions come up, the danger is that you make it about yourself. The danger is that you then start creating a dialogue for what is going on in the other person's head. And that in itself creates stress. That in itself creates all the questions about yourself to yourself. And you never get to what is actually happening with the other person. And that's why for me personally, the hula hoop breathing, that circular breathing, is to have the hula hoop between me and the other person, to create that space of where I can go, what is this person's story? What are they trying to tell me? Have I heard them? Have I listened to them? Or am I making this about me? Am I making up a dialogue for them and not actually allowing them to share their story? Because that's where the creativity lies in any transition, is when you step back, you take your own emotions and your own feelings about it, and you've just put it on the side. And you go, what is this person's thoughts? What are they trying to tell me? Where are they going with this dialogue? And if you go really deep, you can actually then get to a point where it's like, how can I serve this person?
I love that.
Their lives.
I love that hula hoop. I really do. And I got to tell you, she's a friend because she was one of my guests. So I become friends with all of my guests, and she calls herself the hula hooping mama.
Oh, fantastic. I
because
love
that's
that.
what she likes to do, you know, for stress and relaxation. And I mean, she posts some of her videos, and it's pretty amazing some of the things that she can do with her hula hoop. So it's nice to know that you can also use it to calm yourself down, to help with your breathing, and to create that space. I really like that. The idea that you can have that distance in that space, but still be connected to that other person, but not necessarily take on their stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's when I talked about serving that person and how I can help that person, is in my mind, I'm actually handing them the hula hoop where they hold on to the other side. I'm on the opposite. There's this big space between us, but we're still connected. So we can still hear each other, listen to each other, but without feeling that we've stepped inside the hula hoop together. And, you know, being overwhelmed by each other's emotions and feelings.
This is really a crazy question, and I don't know why I'm asking it or where it's coming from, but is the hula hoop vertical or horizontal?
You could have it whichever way you wanted. When I first started with this transition period in my life, it was vertical. I needed that direct visual space between myself and whatever was going on. I am very excited and happy to say that mine has now become horizontal, where I can look over and around, and yeah, the more relaxed and the more excited I become about whatever transition I'm in, the more people you can just get to hold on to that hula hoop together.
That's awesome. And, you know, when you first started talking about it, mine was vertical as well. But then I thought, what if I turned it horizontal? What would that look like?
Beautiful.
And now that you've mentioned it, because I'm thinking, I'm going to take that idea of the hula hoop the next time I go to the dojo and work out with a partner. And then I thought, I can take that hula hoop and I can turn it in so many different directions in relationship to some of the techniques that we're practicing or working on. So thank you for that. Maybe I'm going to even title this episode The Hula Hoop.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, of course, but okay. So the other thing, oh, go ahead.
No, go. It was just back to the breathing thing. I remember as a child, I had hiccups, and my grandmother always said, take the plate, a big dinner plate, and put it at the bottom of your chin and try and breathe over the plate. Because what it does is it opens your airway, lifts your diaphragm, and you get rid of the hiccups, all back down to breathing again. And so that's where the hula hoop thing for me came from, is, you know, vertical, horizontal, who's holding on, and space and opening up to be able to breathe.
So since you're the one that brought up hiccuping, because as of course, hiccups is a spasmatic diaphragm. So your diaphragm is actually spasming. And you've probably had this experience if you worked in cardiac surgery, the cardiac surgical unit. A lot of times the chest tubes irritate the diaphragm. And so these poor patients, they would wake up after they were extubated and they would have horrible hiccups. And of course, with your chest being split open. So I actually figured out how to breathe and teach them to breathe, you know, like holding their breath, deep breath in, holding it for as long as they can, and slowly little like sip exhales. And it worked every time. Worked every time. Yeah.
So. And it's just letting the body know you are now in a safe space. There is not a bear that's going to attack you. You don't need to run. You can just be. And, you know, and then when I work with my health patients, you know, suddenly they don't have indigestion anymore. Suddenly they don't have, you know, digestion issues with their bowel. Suddenly their hearts are not in all these different arrhythmias. And that's one of the reasons why I'm such a huge fan of medical doctors and medical nurses working with holistic practitioners, to bring all of these things together and not just look at more medication or more this, or, you know, the full picture.
Have you ever read the book or seen the book titled Breath?
Yes, so interesting. My physical therapist, I've got some shoulder stuff at the moment, is breathing this book. It feels like he's breathing this book because he's so excited about it. Yeah, he just told me about it the other day. So I'm quite excited to see. It's on my list of things to read.
Yeah, I have it, and I've read probably through maybe 3/4 of it, and I found it absolutely fascinating. And it was my sensei who was all excited about it. He's actually an acupuncturist as well as, martial artist. And he was all excited about it. And he was telling me, and I'm such a skeptic, and I'm kind of rolling my eyes going, okay, breath. And he says, oh, you probably already know some of this stuff anyway. And I'm like, well, but the more he talked about it and his enthusiasm and some of the things he was saying about the book, it really piqued my interest. So I did look it up on Amazon and I bought it right away. And I find that book so fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't remember the name of the author, but for the listening audience, I highly recommend it. Just go to Amazon or even just Google the book Breath, because it is so fascinating and it's really full of really good information from a cardiovascular, physiological perspective. However, he writes it in a way that the layperson can easily follow it. And he tells all of this information through the power of storytelling. So if it's so interesting and fascinating. I didn't think that I wouldn't be able to put it down. I thought this is really just amazing. So it's a really good book. So I love that you're talking about the breath and how magical it really is. We have that one thing right at our fingertips that we just don't even use.
Absolutely. Costs no money. It takes no time. You do it all the time anyway. Just train yourself to do it properly.
So I'm going to throw out a challenge for the audience, which is something I never really do, but this is so fascinating, is as you're going around, going about your day, your normal routine, notice how many times that you are holding your breath, and it really might surprise you. Because I did that one time. It started when I was emptying the dishwasher and I realized I'm holding my breath. Why am I holding my breath? I don't need to do that. And then I noticed something else. I was doing the laundry. It's like, I'm holding my breath. This is so ridiculous. So once I brought that awareness to it, then, I catch myself more and more often. So I'm not holding my breath, especially after reading that book. It's powerful.
Yes. It is amazing what happens to our physiologically when we don't breathe properly.
And it screws everything up. And he actually even has some case studies of people who've cured themselves of like horrible diseases. And I mean, it was just fascinating. So I want to go back to something. This is going way back in our conversation. This is why I'm taking notes, so I don't forget the really interesting parts. But you're talking about that client with dyslexia and how it really shook him up and rattled him. But yet there he was a successful business person. He was running a company. No problem. Then all of a sudden he gets this diagnosis or this label of dyslexia. And I have a really big issue once people are given a label that they eventually become the label, because when we hear that, I mean, again, we hear it and then it's like our hearing shrinks and all we hear is that label, dyslexia. I was a chronic pain patient for 2.5 years. And that's all I heard was, you're a chronic pain patient. You will always be this chronic pain patient. So it just goes, it kind of just recycles. It's kind of on a loop that keeps playing in your head. And then eventually you are that label. So if this is something you can talk about.
It becomes your belief system. And you end up believing that you can't do anything but be dyslexic, for example. And having to step out of a belief system takes time, and you need skilled people around you, or inspirational people around you to guide you through this period. Because as we've talked already, stepping out of that comfort zone, which is a belief system, so you suddenly have this label, you become comfortable with it, and you stay with it. I can't do anything. I'm dyslexic. And then having to step out of that, change that belief system is it's very brave and very courageous. But then having to have a system, support and guidance to continue the journey so you don't keep falling back is so vital and so important. And for the clients that I worked with, he knows that I'm talking about this. By the way, I've asked his permission, so it's not a problem. He now sees it as a superpower. And it all came from, I was doing the breathing with him just to get the anxiety to go away, because he realized that not having known that he had dyslexia, meant that he had all this anxiety that was just like a fireball in his chest, causing this shallow breathing that he was doing.
Wow.
And then once we managed to get the release of the anxiety and getting the breathing, so the hula hoop breathing and all that we did, many different techniques, he was able to start realizing that he has come as far as he has with his new label.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And there was this a psychologist, and there's a few doctors who've written this about it. It's also mentioned in Grey's Anatomy, about the superpower, the super person stand. You know, where you put your hands on your hips, you put your chest out, open yourself up to take a big breath, look up into the air, and think about that. And so he was watching, he saw that, he came back to me and he told, maybe my dyslexia is a superpower, maybe you're breathing. And I went, exactly. So forget about what that means, the stand, but think about physiologically what happens to you when you stand in a superhero stance. You've opened your chest, you've pulled your shoulders back, therefore you can take more air in. And you've released all this anxiety because you've got the oxygen in, you've got rid of the carbon dioxide, and you've put yourself in a position of, I'm strong. And so, yeah, he uses his dyslexia as a superpower, because it's opened up a whole new world for him of creativity. He's never understood why he was able to look at situations that nobody, from an angle that nobody else could look at it. And it's because of this superpower of his. And he can now look at things and go, actually, if we do this in the business, it will help with this. And nobody else was able to see that. So yeah, he's an out-the-box thinker, as I like to call it, using his superpower of dyslexia to be amazing.
I really love that story. And I'm also thinking that maybe any diagnosis, I'm using air quotes here, or any label can actually be or turn into your superpower.
Absolutely. Sarcoidosis for me is a superpower. I get to speak to people about an inflammatory disease or chronic illness or whatever label you want to put on it. And I can just go, but it's opened up this path for me.
Right.
You know, I never thought I would be able to go on a podcast and speak to people, because will my heart be able to deal with it? Will my breathing be able to deal with it? Yes, you can do anything you want. Just see how you fit into it and find your path. Listen, be open, connect your heart and your brain and your gut.
It's the opportunities that come from life's challenges.
Yes.
Which is basically
absolutely.
what you do, is you help people with those transitions.
Yeah, because we all have the answers that we need to get through a transition or a challenge. It's just having the opportunity to be quiet enough to hear it.
And that is really, that's definitely a life skill. And that is definitely very challenging, especially now with the, you know, I mean, we're already on so much information overload, even before COVID. But then when COVID hit and we're all trying to navigate our way through it, and of course, ta-da, we're able to do podcasts, you know, remotely and all these wonderful things. And now we're spending even more and more time in front of our computers, our devices, which is wonderful because we get to, you know, expand our communities and our circle of friends and acquaintances and colleagues. But on the other hand, it's still more noise and it's more input. So that's why it's so important to be able to step aside and get that quiet time.
Yes, absolutely. And isn't it ironic that the world had a pandemic that was a respiratory illness, you know, as kind of the world saying, you all need to stop and breathe and listen. Because none of you are. And a lot of my clients that I've had recently, you know, still in that transition of having not had the opportunity to say goodbye to a loved one because of lockdowns. But it's just, you know, it's about breathing and realizing what was going on. And those, just to go back to the emotions that we were talking about earlier, those are emotions we have to deal with. Those are emotions we have to acknowledge and not put aside, but doing it in a constructive way, with support, with guidance, it can have some beautiful outcomes. Yeah.
Well, you've certainly made some beautiful outcomes with your own journey. So now tell us a little bit about your coaching services, because I saw, I was, like I said, stalking you online, and I saw,
Yes.
yeah, I like doing that. And I saw you have 3 different coaching programs listed on your website. So just tell the audience about that and how you work.
So I've got the Discovery program, which is a 90-day program. And that's basically discovering what is holding you back. And a lot of that time is spent on the breathing. A lot of that time is getting rid of the anxiety. A lot of that time is learning to listen, hear, and the process of changing the questions that you give yourself, the questions you give the world, the questions you give to people, into creative questions, open-ended questions, so that you can hear yourself, but hear other people, and see situations where you can actually connect with your heart, with your brain, with your gut, so that you are more equipped to deal with every life challenge. And that's the main goal, is to connect that creativity, that joy, to stop the surviving. I just need to get through today. Today was so bad. Thank goodness I got through it. Is to change that dialogue into, I got through today and I achieved this and I did that and I served here and I helped there. And, I was in a queue the other day and there was lots of people that was very upset about things. And I just made a decision. This lady that was helping everybody, when it's my turn, I want to make sure that when she goes home tonight, that she tells herself, that was a good day. It finished good. I want to do that for her. And that's what I try and do with a 90-day program with my clients, because then once you do that for other people, you start doing it for yourself. And then the second one is the Reconnecting Life program. That's a 6-month one. And that's where we take all the skills from the 90-day program and really dig deep. And that's where there's lots of lifestyle changes. There's lots of belief system changes. I work very closely with the clients to do timeline searches, where we go right back to where they were babies, pre-birth, post-birth, and really work on those memories and those thoughts that's turned into belief systems, because all of that stuff in our lives is set in the first 5 years. And then, the Living Your Truth coaching program is the one where it's a long-term program where I give coaching to clients twice a month, once they've completed the Discover and Reconnect programs.
So tell the audience how people can get a hold of you. Where can they find you?
They can find me on my website, my blog site, www.vanderwaltcoaching.com. And they can also find me on Instagram.
Okay, and I will have the links on the show notes, but I just like my guests to be able to share that with the audience. And let me see, what else did I want to ask you? Oh my gosh, it just kind of went right out of my head. Oh yes, the blogs. You do have some great blog posts.
Oh, thank you very much. The blog post started off with just wanting to talk about all the different transitions. And it was going to be a health transition blog, where I was going to talk about my health and my how I got through it or over it or around it, and how it's part of me and part of what I do. But it ended up being a blog mostly about my voice. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, because as I was working with my life coach and my business coach, it turned out that I was very scared of my own voice. I hated my own voice, and all the program, where that came from, what that was made by, what the belief system behind it was, and I started writing, realizing that is one way of using my voice, is to write. And that's where the blog came from. And so a lot of the blogs are about meeting my friend Doubt, realizing that my voice is not just the physical manifestation, There is the breathing manifestation of the voice, but there's also the people I serve, the people I help, the people I guide, the coaching, the nursing. And yeah, so that's where that is at the moment. Very excited. And the last one I just wrote was about stepping into my fear, the fear of going onto podcasts.
You're doing a fine job. I like to think it's because I'm such a fantastic host, but
You are. It's been wonderful being here. Absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you. But it is an incredibly powerful experience, isn't it, when you do finally find your own voice?
Yes, absolutely. It is to get to a point where you are not afraid of it. Because there was a time in my life where I was actually physically afraid of the sound that will come out, and what it would do to me, what the conversations would cause about it. That wasn't very good English. What you get what I mean.
Yes.
And to get over that, to step over it, to then stop using that language of stepping over it to avoid it, but to then go, it is mine. Embrace it.
Okay, one last question, I promise.
All
okay.
good.
So with the writing that you're doing and all of these wonderful blog posts, is there a book in your future?
I hope so. I hope so. There's so many titles in my head and there's so many thoughts about it. I'm at the moment just working through the last 3 years of my life and putting that into the blog. And then the idea is that once I've done that, I can read through it and put it together into a book. Yes.
That's a great way of doing it. That's how both of my books started with blog posts.
Yeah. So I'm very excited about it.
It's very exciting too. And when you do write the book, when it goes live, you have to contact me.
I will do. Absolutely.
You can come back on the show. You could talk about your book, talk about the experience of writing it and promote it. And I would absolutely love for you to do that for us.
Thank you. Yes, I know. I'd love to come back and do that. Yeah, very exciting. Best get on with it.
Let's get on with it. Well, you have to write the book first.
Exactly. Best get on with writing the book. That's what I mean.
Well, James, you are a delightful guest. It has been wonderful talking to you. I really appreciate you spending your time with us. And you've given us so much valuable information. Is there one final little pearl of wisdom that you would leave with the audience before we sign off?
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure and privilege to be here. Thank you. It's been very calming and relaxing. And as you say on your podcast, it is a conversation between friends. And it felt like that today. So thank you. One last thought. In order to have effective life transitions, you have to use ownership and learning together. Own your own life and learn from your own life and put it all together so you can get through your transitions or challenges. That's another word for transitions. Because
they're always happening and we will always have transitions in life. And when you have the skill and the tools to be able to get through them the way you did, they're not so scary.
Exactly. And when they are scary, you're not concerned about it. You're not worried about it because you've got all the tools.
So you could still sleep at night and you could still breathe.
Exactly. Well,
James, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. It's been an honor to have you.
Thank you, Cheryl. It was wonderful and an honor to be here. I appreciate it. Thank you. Great meeting you.
Oh, thank you. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. And do go to James' website. Check out his blog. He's got some fantastic articles and great information there that he has written, which will be a book someday. And check out his coaching programs and his Instagram. And, if you have any questions for him, I'm sure you can reach him through his website and he would love to hear from you.
Yeah, there's websites, direct messaging, there's email addresses, everything they need is there. Thank you.
So you can stalk him. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. Okay, so remember, the one big takeaway I think from this episode was breathe. Remember to breathe. It's going to help you through everything, but especially through your life transitions. And if you're going through a transition that you cannot find your way through, give James a holler. He can help you do it.
I'll be happy to hear from them. Thank you.
Excellent. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.